I never expected to feel the ground shift beneath me at a charity dinner, of all places. That night started like any other obligation wrapped in a tuxedo. Bland appetizers, self-congratulatory speeches, and endless small talk from people more concerned with being seen than actually contributing. Amy had insisted we go. Said it would be good for appearances, especially since some of her company's board members would be there. I didn't argue. I rarely did when it came to her work. We arrived just after 7. The Denver skyline glowed behind the glass walls of the event hall, and the place buzzed with artificial charm. Waiters in white gloves weaved through clusters of people, balancing trays of sparkling wine and miniature crab cakes. Amy looked perfect as always, effortlessly polished, dressed in a deep green gown that turned heads when we entered. I told her she looked stunning. She gave me the kind of smile that didn't quite reach her eyes and adjusted the strap of her clutch on her shoulder. The moment didn't happen until just before the silent auction began. We were seated near the stage, close enough to hear the host mic checking behind the curtain. Amy was laughing at something a man across from us said. One of her boardroom types, I think, when I noticed her clutch slide open slightly as she reached down to pick up her wine glass. An envelope slipped out, quiet as a secret, and fluttered to the floor between us. I was the only one who noticed. It was nothing dramatic. No gasp, no double take. But I saw her freeze for half a breath. Her eyes dropped down, and she moved with a subtle urgency that only I, someone who had spent nearly 6 years studying her body language, could catch. She reached down and scooped up the envelope in a fluid, practiced motion, her fingers curling over it like it was something precious or dangerous. I caught just a glimpse of it before it disappeared back into her clutch. White envelope, embossed seal, Riverside Suites, gold lettering, familiar. There was a small post-it note clipped to the front. Late checkout confirmed 1 p.m. Amy tucked it away and immediately redirected the energy in the room. She leaned into me with a bright, exaggerated smile and nodded toward the stage. "Look at that painting," she said, brushing her fingers lightly along my forearm. "Wouldn't it look amazing in your office?" I stared at her, blinking once, then turned my gaze to the painting, a generic watercolor of a mountain range. I nodded slowly. "Sure, looks peaceful." She laughed too loudly, then clinked her glass with mine. No one else at the table seemed to notice the shift, but I felt it, like the floor had tilted a few degrees without warning. From that moment on, my brain didn't let go. Riverside Suites. That name hit like a sh*T to the ribs. It wasn't a normal hotel, not the kind you'd stay at for business travel. It was upscale, discreet, boutique. It sat near the edge of the arts district, close enough to be accessible, but far enough to be out of sight. The kind of place you went to when you wanted privacy, or when you didn't want to be seen at all. It wasn't just the hotel, though. It was the look in her eyes, the calculated shift in her voice, her smile, the way she pivoted the conversation so effortlessly. Like she'd rehearsed for this exact scenario. It didn't feel like the moment surprised her. It felt like she had a response chambered, ready to go. The rest of the evening passed in a fog. She was her usual self, maybe even more attentive than usual. Laughing at jokes, filling silences, touching my arm gently whenever I looked too far away. I must have smiled and nodded through half a dozen conversations I barely registered. But inside, everything was rewinding, replaying. All those little things I'd brushed off over the past few months. The subtle shifts, the strange excuses, were suddenly forming a pattern I couldn't ignore. There was the night she turned off geolocation sharing on her phone. When I asked, she said it was a glitch from the last iOS update and that she'd fix it. She never did. Then came the second eSIM. For work travel, she said. But she hadn't gone on a work trip since February. When I asked why she needed 2 separate numbers, she said it was just easier for client calls. Sounded plausible. At the time, she started withdrawing cash too. Not a lot. Just enough to slip under the radar. Yoga retreats, she called them. But the studio she claimed to attend didn't even offer retreats, and I should know. I'd gone with her once early on. They barely had enough space for a normal class, let alone weekend getaways. Then came the dinners. Receipts from restaurants we'd never visited. 2 entrees. 2 glasses of wine. When I asked about them, she laughed it off. Client dinners, she said. Boring, honestly. There was more. The front porch camera, the one we'd installed together after a package was stolen, started going offline. Not always, but always on Tuesday and Thursday evenings. She claimed it was a bug with the firmware, and that she'd submit a ticket. She never followed up. I checked. And the gym. This new fitness club she joined about 2 months ago. Expensive. Private. Open 7 days a week. Except it mysteriously closed on every federal holiday. And yet, she claimed to be there on Memorial Day. And the 4th of July. And Labor Day. Even posted pictures in gym clothes. Always from the parking lot. Never inside. I hadn't put the pieces together until now. But in the Uber ride home, I sat beside her in silence as it all clicked into place. She leaned her head against the window, scrolling through something on her phone. Her lipstick was still perfect, her hair tucked behind one ear. She looked calm, normal, like she hadn't just accidentally dropped a match onto gasoline. "Everything okay?" she asked, glancing sideways at me. "Yeah," I said too quickly. "Just tired." She smiled and slipped her hand into mine. I didn't squeeze back. My thoughts drifted to one more strange detail, something I hadn't questioned until just now. A few weeks ago, Amy added someone new to her nephew's daycare pickup list. Her sister had mentioned it in passing. How nice it was that Uncle Ray was helping out. Uncle Ray? We don't have an Uncle Ray. Amy's family is small. No cousins close by. No siblings aside from her sister. No Ray. When I asked her about it, she got defensive. "It's just a placeholder name. You know, like when I pick him up and forget my ID." But that didn't make sense. She'd picked him up dozens of times before without ever needing an alias. And now this envelope. Riverside Suites. Late checkout. Silent look. Quick smile. Redirected conversation. And every instinct I had screaming that something wasn't right. When we got home, she kissed me lightly and said she was going to shower. I sat in the living room, staring at nothing. I didn't want to go through her phone. I didn't want to become that guy. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't sure I knew the woman sleeping next to me. And I needed answers. The next morning, I woke up before the alarm, though I'd barely slept. Amy was still in bed, curled on her side, one arm hanging off the edge like she didn't have a care in the world. I watched her for a minute, trying to summon some version of the man I used to be. The guy who'd roll over, kiss her shoulder, and pull her close. But all I saw was the envelope, the logo, the note, the way her smile had locked into place like a mask. I slipped out of bed and went downstairs, made coffee, sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open, not really reading anything. I just stared at our bank account. It had become a habit lately. Maybe I was looking for patterns. Maybe I was hoping not to find one. But there it was. A charge from Riverside Suites. Processed at 7:42 a.m. today. She was still asleep when that went through. And yet the checkout note said 1 p.m. So, was that the final charge? Or a room service bill? I stared at it for a long time. The logical part of my brain, what little of it hadn't been steamrolled by suspicion, told me not to jump to conclusions. Maybe it was old. Maybe it was some kind of mistake. Maybe the system just processed it late. But I knew better. I knew my wife's patterns. And this wasn't random. Around 8:30, I told Amy I had to run a quick work errand downtown. She didn't even look up from her phone. "Okay," she mumbled, halfway through texting. "Can you grab oat milk on your way back?" I nodded, grabbed my keys, and left. I didn't tell her where I was going. I didn't say Riverside Suites. I didn't ask any questions. Because I wasn't looking for permission. I was looking for the truth. It was colder downtown than I expected. One of those crisp fall mornings where the sky looked too blue to be real. The sidewalks were scattered with leaves, and I passed a street musician playing something soft on a saxophone. None of it touched me. I pulled into a garage a block away and walked to the hotel. I didn't want to park in front. I didn't want to be seen. Not yet. Riverside Suites was as pristine as I remembered. modern, understated. A wall of black marble in the lobby, muted lighting, a desk clerk with a polite but distant expression. I stepped inside like I had every right to be there, like I belonged. And then the elevator dinged. Amy stepped out. My stomach dropped. She wasn't alone. Next to her was a man I recognized but couldn't place right away. Early 40s, athletic build, dark hair combed neatly back. He wore a gray blazer, no tie, and he was adjusting the collar as he laughed at something she said. Her lipstick was slightly smeared, and her hair was pulled into a lazy knot that hadn't been there when I left the house. They didn't see me at first. I was off to the side, behind one of the oversized planters near the lounge area. My body went still, not frozen, just locked in place. My pulse slowed, and for a moment, it felt like I was watching a movie, not living it. Then she turned her head, saw me. Her face shifted instantly, not to surprise, but something else. Control. A mask sliding into place. She straightened up, smiled too brightly, and nudged the man gently toward the front desk. I stepped forward. The man was already checking out, leaning over the counter, scribbling something on a form. I glanced down. Room service receipt. 2 breakfast items. Coffee for 2. Timestamp. 6:55 a.m. Checkout. Pending. Amy tried to intercept me. Matt, she said quickly, brushing past a couple of guests. What are you doing here? I thought you had. I was in the area, I said flatly. Her eyes flicked toward the man. Matt, this is... Don't, I said, sharper than I meant to. Just don't. He looked up then. Recognition flashed in his eyes, but he didn't say anything, just gave me a tight nod and walked toward the door. Amy didn't follow him. She stayed rooted in place, hands clutched in front of her like she was posing for a photo. Her mouth opened, then closed again. She looked young in that moment, almost scared. I can explain, she said. I stared at her, not blinking, not breathing. Then I turned and walked out. I didn't go home. Instead, I drove straight to the office. My hands were shaking the whole way. I took the long route down by the river past the college campus, anywhere but home. I didn't know what I'd do if I walked through that front door and saw her there, pretending like nothing had happened, asking if I got the oat milk. When I finally got to work, I told my team I was taking point on the Richards account. It was a crisis contract, tight deadline, high pressure. No one questioned it. They were just glad someone else was willing to burn the midnight oil. And that's exactly what I did. I didn't go home that night. I stayed at the office, ordered takeout, threw myself into spreadsheets and vendor audits. Anything to numb the quiet rage in my chest. I slept for maybe 20 minutes in the lounge, woke up to the hum of the vending machine and the cold glare of fluorescent lights. And then it happened. Around 2 a.m. I was in my boss's office, reviewing access reports for a bid submission, when a security alert pinged on the corner of the screen. Company protocol. Automated surveillance flag from the garage system. I clicked it open without thinking. And that's when everything unraveled. The video feed showed Amy. She was walking through the company parking garage. Not once, not twice, for times. Over the last 2 months. Each time she was with the same man, the one from the hotel. The project coordinator. He wasn't from our company, but I recognized him now. He worked for an outside firm that had been bidding for our logistics overhaul. The Richards contract. The same one I had just taken over. In the footage, he was walking her toward the back stairwell, where there were no cameras, no records, just quiet shadows. I opened the access logs. Amy's name came up 3 times, under a visitor badge I never knew she had. And worse, her check-ins matched the same day's confidential proposal drafts had leaked to our competitor. Dates I knew by heart, because I wrote those drafts. First, I thought it was coincidence, but the overlap was too precise, too frequent. When I pulled the subcontractor's access credentials, the pattern was obvious. He'd logged into our secure proposal system twice, both times flagged as review only, both times after Amy had visited. I brought it to my boss the next morning. He read the report in silence, then asked me to leave the room. 10 minutes later, he called me back. The subcontractor was suspended pending investigation. Legal was involved. Amy's name was being flagged in the visitor audit for further review. I offered to provide any additional context. And then I made one final move. I gave them copies of the hotel receipts, the security footage, the email from our daycare app showing Uncle Ray listed under Amy's name. Because this wasn't just infidelity anymore. This was corporate sabotage. Whether intentional or not, my wife had just walked us both into a legal minefield. Back at home that night, she was waiting for me, on the couch, still dressed for work, but with her shoes off and her knees pulled to her chest like she was a teenager caught sneaking out. "I know what it looked like," she said quietly as I stepped inside. I didn't respond. "Matt, please, let me explain. It wasn't about us. It was about us," I said. "It always was." She stood, tried to close the space between us. I stepped back. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen." I laughed, dry, hollow. "You didn't mean for the hotel?" I asked. "Or the leaked documents? Or the camera blackouts? Which part exactly was the accident?" Her mouth opened, but no words came. "Matt, it wasn't like that. He was helping with what? Destroying my life? I didn't know he worked for the competitor." "You didn't know," I repeated. "But you knew enough to sneak into my building." Silence. I didn't yell. I didn't threaten. I didn't cry. I just walked to the study, closed the door, and called a lawyer. I'd never pictured myself in a lawyer's office under these circumstances. Divorce? Sure, it's something you imagine in abstract. You hear about friends going through it, coworkers whispering in break rooms. But when it's your name on the intake form, when you're sitting across from a man in a blue tie with a pad of legal paper and a pen that never stops moving, it doesn't feel abstract anymore. It feels clinical. Feels final. My lawyer's name was Everett Cho, sharp, focused, calm in the way that makes you feel either safe or fully dissected. I didn't say much during our first meeting. Just handed him a folder full of evidence and let the silence do most of the talking. He flipped through the documents slowly, nodding every few pages. "Timeline checks out," he muttered. "You have hotel receipts, visitor logs, security footage. Surveillance timestamps are clean. She's not going to be able to argue circumstantial." "I'm not trying to bury her," I said quietly. "I just want a clean break." He looked up. "And protection," he said, "from any blowback if this turns into a corporate issue." I nodded once. Everett sat back and tapped his pen against the table. "Here's the good news. You have no shared kids, minimal joint assets, and you've done your due diligence. We'll file for divorce this week. The house is in your name, correct? Premarital asset. I bought it before we met." "Perfect. Then you'll keep it. And if she tries to drag anything out, we'll bring in discovery. Her lawyer's going to see that folder and advise her to fold." I leaned back in my chair, exhaling for what felt like the first time in days. "She's not going to admit to anything," I said. Everett didn't flinch. "She won't have to. The paper trail does it for her." When I got home that evening, the energy in the house was stale, like someone had paused the world and forgot to hit play again. Amy was sitting at the kitchen table, staring into a cold cup of tea. "Matt," she started, but I held up a hand. "You don't have to explain anything." "I want to explain. You had your chance." I walked past her and into the study, but I didn't close the door. That night, she knocked gently on the frame. "I talked to HR," she said. "Told them I'm taking a leave." I didn't respond. I know I screwed everything up. Still nothing. She stepped inside, arms folded. "Matt, please. We can go to therapy. I'll answer anything. I'm not trying to lie to you anymore." "That's the problem, Amy," I said, turning to look at her. "It's not that you lied. It's that you built an entire system around the lie. Hotel bookings, fake names at daycare, burner apps, badge access. This wasn't spontaneous. It was organized." She looked down. "I didn't mean to betray you." I raised an eyebrow. She backtracked. I didn't plan for it to go that far. He was helping me with something personal and It escalated. I didn't say anything. Look, I get it. You hate me. You think I'm some kind of villain. I stood. Amy, you think this is about hating you? She blinked. I don't hate you. I trusted you. I rearranged my life for you. You were my partner. And when things got complicated, you didn't just walk away. You dragged me into the mud with you. She opened her mouth, then closed it. I'm filing, I said simply. My lawyer will be in touch. And I walked out. The next week was a blur of logistics. Bank account separation, password changes, safe deposit box access. I transferred my remaining joint assets into a legal trust. I blocked her email at work. I asked IT to scrub her visitor profile from our system, citing internal security risks. No one questioned it. My boss called me in the day after the investigation started. You did the right thing, he said. I didn't do anything. He shook his head. You didn't shield her either. That matters. The subcontractor's contract was suspended. An internal audit was launched. Amy was blacklisted from visiting any affiliated buildings. I didn't gloat. I didn't even feel vindicated. All I felt was relief and grief. One night, about 10 days after the hotel, I found a box in the hallway. It had my name on it, scrawled in her handwriting. Inside were photographs, our wedding, our honeymoon, birthdays, anniversaries. Every frame we'd ever hung. Every **T I thought meant something. There was a note on top. I don't expect forgiveness. I just want you to know I remember. I sat on the floor with that box for a long time. I didn't cry. I didn't burn the photos. I just packed them tighter, sealed the box, and put it in the garage, right next to everything else I didn't need anymore. Amy's lawyer reached out the next morning. The tone was clipped and direct. She wasn't contesting the divorce. No claims to the house. No push for spousal support. She just wanted a dignified and quiet resolution. Everett smirked when he read the email. She wants this over before the corporate fallout hits her resume. I didn't reply to the message. I let my lawyer handle everything. 3 days later, we signed the first set of papers. I started sleeping again. Not well. Not deeply. But enough. Work became a refuge. My boss gave me a new project, something far from the old one. No connections to the subcontractor. No ties to Amy's firm. I was grateful. I also started therapy. At first, I wasn't sure why. I didn't feel broken. Just detached. But the therapist helped put words to things I hadn't named. Moral injury, betrayal trauma, institutional failure. Not just the affair. Not just the hotel. But the way I'd slowly stopped listening to myself over time. The way I'd buried red flags under routine. Why didn't I leave sooner? I asked once. She leaned forward gently. Because you loved her. And people who love deeply often wait until they have no other choice. That sat with me. Still does. Amy moved out on a Friday. She packed quietly. Took only her clothes, her laptop, and a few books. Left behind everything else. I didn't speak to her. Didn't help. Just watched from the kitchen as she carried 2 suitcases down the stairs. At the door, she paused. Matt, she said, voice soft. Can I say one thing? I nodded. I never stopped loving you. I lost my sense of who I was. I looked at her for a long moment. You had a choice, I said. And you didn't lose anything. You gave it away. She flinched, turned, and left. The divorce was finalized in 33 days. Fastest one our lawyer said he'd ever seen for a marriage over 5 years. When the judge signed the papers, I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt clear. It was like someone had turned down the static in my head. The corporate fallout came a week later. Amy's project coordinator was formally linked to the competitor. Evidence of document transfers, metadata stamps, digital breadcrumbs. The subcontractor was blacklisted from all future bids. A memo went out to all departments, reiterating compliance guidelines and third-party ethics reviews. Amy's name wasn't mentioned publicly, but she was quietly let go from her firm. I heard about it through someone in accounting who used to be friendly with her. No fanfare, no goodbye email, just gone. I didn't celebrate, but I didn't feel sorry either. A month after it was all over, I found myself walking through a farmer's market alone. There was a woman selling these handmade journals with leather covers and stitched bindings. I stopped at her booth, asked a few questions, and left with a blank one tucked under my arm. That night I wrote 3 pages. Not about Amy, not about the affair, just about me. What I'd ignored, what I'd learned, what I would never allow again. They say healing isn't linear, and they're right. Some days I'd wake up and feel like I'd leveled up emotionally, clear-headed, strong, almost proud of myself for how I'd handled everything. Other days I'd brush my teeth and suddenly catch myself remembering the sound Amy made when she laughed at TV commercials, or how she used to lean on the kitchen counter reading recipes she'd never cook. It wasn't grief, not exactly. More like emotional whiplash, the aftershock of being jolted out of a reality you didn't know was fake. The journal helped. I didn't write every day, but when I did, I wrote with purpose. I wasn't pouring out poetry or philosophizing about the meaning of betrayal. I was taking inventory, mapping my blind spots, listing the red flags I'd ignored, writing the things I wished I'd said the first night she lied about where she was going. One of the entries just read, "Trust is not built through apologies. It's built through consistency." Another, "The second you start justifying behavior that makes you feel small, you're already disappearing." I stopped drinking coffee from the mug she bought me, "Best husband ever," and replaced it with a plain white one from a diner down the street. It wasn't symbolic. It just felt better in my hand. Like I wasn't pretending anymore. Work got busier as fall turned to winter. The new project had legs. Lots of moving pieces, tight timelines, and people who were too distracted to care about my personal life, which suited me fine. My office became a second home. I redecorated, brought in a small speaker, a plant, and a framed photo of the mountain trail I used to hike before everything went sideways. I started going to the gym again, not the kind of boutique club Amy had joined, but the simple one by my building. No mirrors, no influencers, just iron and sweat and silence. The therapist encouraged that. "You need places that belong entirely to you," she'd said. "Routines that aren't built around someone else." It made sense. Then came the part one didn't expect. The reactions. Most people I knew didn't even ask what happened between me and Amy. They'd heard something, probably pieced it together through office gossip or neighborhood whispers. But when we bumped into each other at the grocery store, at company mixers, even once at a holiday event, they kept it surface level. Except for a few. One night, I met up with Jason, a friend I hadn't seen since the early days of my marriage. We grabbed drinks at a bar that used to be our spot back when we were single and full of dumb optimism. He didn't dance around it. "I heard what happened," he said, swirling his beer. "Tough break." I nodded. That's one way to put it. She always had that compartmentalized thing going on, like she could separate what she felt from what she did. I looked up. "You noticed," he shrugged. "We all did, man. But you were in love. And none of us wanted to be the guy to say, 'Hey, maybe your wife gives off sketchy vibes.'" I laughed at that because it was honest. Uncomfortable, but honest. He raised his glass. "To clean exits and better instincts." I clinked mine with his, and didn't argue. Amy texted me a few weeks later. It was short. "Just wanted to say I hope you're okay. That's all." I stared at the message for a full minute before locking my phone and tossing it on the couch. She didn't deserve a response. Not because I was being spiteful, but because that message wasn't about me. It was about her, her guilt, her need for closure, her attempt to rewrite the ending as something softer than it was. I didn't block her. I just didn't reply. One night, I went back to Riverside Suites. Not inside. I just parked across the street and sat there with the engine off, watching the valet shuffle cars and guests step out in formal wear. It was strange how neutral I felt. No rage, no humiliation, just distance. I thought about what it took for her to meet him here. The logistics, the lies, the phone calls, the calculated detours, all the effort she put into making sure I stayed in the dark. And I realized something. The betrayal didn't begin at the hotel. It began long before that. with the first choice she made to hide instead of confront. That was the true turning point. The hotel was just where it all collapsed. I started dating again in January. Cautiously. Nothing serious. No Tinder hookups or dramatic coffee shop meet-cuties. Just real conversations with real people. I let a friend set me up with someone from her gym. Her name was Claire. She taught art at a local high school and had a laugh that made everyone around her want to lean in. We went out for tacos and ended up walking through an antique bookstore afterward. No pressure. No need to impress. Just two people navigating a chapter that didn't begin with heartbreak. At the end of the night, she smiled and said, "You seem like someone who knows exactly what he doesn't want." I laughed. That's a better compliment than you realize. We didn't kiss, and that felt fine. Like we were starting from solid ground instead of diving off a cliff. Sometime in February, I got a call from HR. Apparently, Amy had tried to list me as a reference for a contract-based role at a partner company. The woman on the other end was polite but professional. "I just wanted to confirm you were comfortable providing a character reference before we moved forward." I paused, then said, "No, I'm not." She thanked me and hung up. And that was that. No fireworks. No drama. Just a quiet boundary drawn in permanent marker. By March, my life had settled into something that felt, dare I say it, peaceful. I went back to the mountain trail I used to hike, brought a thermos of coffee, sat on a ridge, and watched the snow melt across the tree line. I wrote in my journal, ate a turkey sandwich, and listened to the wind move through the trees. And for the first time in over a year, I didn't feel the need to explain anything to anyone. I wasn't the guy who got cheated on. I wasn't the employee whose wife sabotaged a contract. I wasn't even Matt and Amy anymore. I was just me. Plain, steady, quiet, and enough. A week later, I bumped into Amy's sister at a grocery store. We hadn't spoken since the divorce, and I didn't expect her to say anything. But she stopped me in the produce section, one hand resting on a bag of apples. "She talks about you," she said quietly, "more than she should." I raised an eyebrow. "And she regrets it." I nodded slowly. "I'm sure she does. She's not the same." I gave a soft chuckle. "Neither am I." She looked like she wanted to say more, but I stepped past her gently and said, "Tell her I said good luck." And I meant it. Not out of kindness. Out of completion. Somewhere around April, my therapist asked me to write a letter I'd never send. To Amy. "Just say what you never got to," she said. "Let it bleed onto the page." So I did. I filled 3 pages. Told her she took more than trust. She took my ability to believe in shared silence. In loyalty without surveillance. In loving someone without having to verify the details. And then I ended it like this. "You may have broken us, Amy, but you didn't break me. And that's the only thing I ever needed to know." I folded the letter, slid it into the back of my journal, and never read it again. Sometimes I still wake up from dreams where nothing went wrong. We're just married. She's beside me. We're laughing. Nothing's broken yet. And I'll lay there in the dark, feeling the ache of something that never really existed. But even then, I never wish it back, because I know what it cost me to get here. And I'm not trading peace for memory ever again. By spring, the divorce was no longer something people whispered about behind my back. It had just become a fact. Like the weather. Like the way people say, "Oh, I heard," and then quickly move on to the next polite topic. It wasn't gossip anymore. It was history. I noticed it most during a quarterly review meeting. One of the directors, someone I used to avoid in the hallway, pulled me aside afterward and said, "You handled it with a kind of grace most people don't have." I wasn't sure what to say to that. Thanks felt hollow. It wasn't grace, it was survival. Felt too honest. So I just nodded. It wasn't about grace. It was about not losing myself in the wreckage. About finding something steady to stand on when everything else gave way. One afternoon in May, I ran into the project coordinator, him, in the lobby of another downtown building. He didn't see me at first. He was standing near the directory, scrolling on his phone, wearing the same smug neutral expression I'd seen back at Riverside. His suit was too crisp. His hair was combed too deliberately. It was like he was trying to project control, but something about him looked tired, shriveled, like a man who had spent too long spinning plates that had all come crashing down. I didn't approach him, didn't say a word, but as I passed behind him, I saw the visitor badge clipped to his jacket. Temporary access only. That told me everything I needed to know. The world catches up eventually. Later that week, I got a letter from Amy. Handwritten. No return address. It wasn't a plea for reconciliation or a defense of her choices. It wasn't dramatic. It was quieter than I expected. Thoughtful, even. She wrote about how she'd started volunteering at a community program. How she was seeing a counselor twice a month. How she'd taken up running, even though I hate it. And how every mile helped her feel like she was shedding pieces of the person she didn't want to be anymore. Then came the part that stuck with me. I don't expect you to believe this, but you were never the problem. You were the mirror I avoided. And when I couldn't face myself, I broke the reflection instead. I read that line 3 times, then folded the letter and filed it away in the drawer where I keep things that no longer hurt but still deserve to be remembered. It wasn't closure. Not really. But it was enough. Enough to know I didn't need anything more. Enough to know I'd never be waiting for the other shoe to drop again. Claire and I kept seeing each other. It was slow. Intentionally slow. She never asked about Amy unless I brought it up, and when I did, she just listened, no commentary, no pity. Just presence. I told her about the hotel, the envelope, the elevator, the parking lot footage. I told her about how I used to spend whole nights running conversations in my head that never actually happened, trying to make sense of lies that were never meant to make sense. And she didn't try to fix it. She just said, "That sounds unbelievably heavy." And somehow, that was more healing than anything else anyone had ever said. One night, as we sat on her porch watching the rain bead across the railing, she asked, "Do you think you'll ever fully trust someone again?"